Just one more, she whispered to the empty street, her voice cracking. Just one more prayer, and you'll fix this. You'll bring me peace. You're holding onto that box so tightly your hands are shaking, he said. Are you holding onto a dream, Grace, or are you just holding onto the past? A man's voice, calm and perceptive, cut through the sound of the downpour from the shadows of the bus stop. Grace froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She spun around, her eyes blurred with tears. How do you know my name? Who are you? The man stepped out from the darkness. He didn't look like a pastor, at least not the kind who stood behind a polished pulpit. He looked like someone who had spent his life listening to stories much heavier than his own, someone who carried the quiet weight of 1,000 secrets. I'm just someone who has watched too many people spend their lives in a waiting room they were never meant to inhabit, he replied. God hasn't abandoned you, but you've been walking around with the spirit of a waiting room, believing your life is on hold until someone else arrives to complete it. You think you're waiting for a husband, but the truth is, you're just terrified of starting your own life. Grace felt the weight of the empty box and the weight of her own history collide. Welcome to Deeper Love Story Hub. If you love emotional, inspiring, and life-changing stories like this one, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Your support helps this channel grow and bring more meaningful stories to life. My name is Grace, and I loved God with all my heart. I learned how to pray before I learned how to breathe on my own. Prayer was the first thing I ever knew. As a child, it was the blanket I pulled up to my chin at night to keep the world away. As an adult, it became my cage, steady, familiar, dependable. Every morning, I knelt beside my bed. No drama, no shouting, just a quiet, bowed head. Lord, make me a wife. Lord, take away this loneliness. Lord, bring the one who will make me whole. I said it every day. The same words, the same tear-stained cadence, as if consistency itself was a form of holiness. I never doubted that God was listening. What I quietly, violently doubted was why he stayed silent while I withered. I believed my life was a transaction. If I was good, if I was kind, if I waited long enough, the reward would be delivered. I thought my singleness was a test of patience, a trial I had to endure before the real part of my life could finally begin. I was living in a state of permanent suspension, treating my own existence as if it were a rehearsal for the moment someone else would finally choose me. But as the rain continued to fall, the silence between the man's words and my own heartbeat began to feel less like a void and more like a door. For the first time, I wasn't just praying for a miracle to happen to me. I was beginning to wonder if the miracle was meant to happen through me, and if I had been too busy looking for a partner to notice the person I was failing to become. I lived my life like a puzzle that was missing a piece. Every morning, I woke up and looked in the mirror, but I did not feel like a whole person. I felt like a half. I believed that I was only waiting for a man to come along and be the other half of me. Only then, I thought, would I finally be complete. My days had a very sad rhythm. I would go to work, but I was always watching other people. I saw couples holding hands in the park, and I saw friends getting engaged at dinner. I felt a heavy ache in my chest every single time. It felt like everyone else was walking in the sun while I was stuck walking in the shadows. I would smile at them, but inside I was crying. I kept asking God, why are they happy and why am I still alone? I tried to be a good person. I helped my neighbors and I gave to the church. I thought if I was extra kind, God would look at me and say, Grace is so sweet. She deserves a ring on her finger. I treated my faith like a deal. I did my part, so I waited for God to do his part. But the ring never came. My apartment stayed quiet, and my heart stayed lonely. I spent all my time planning for a life that wasn't there yet. I bought fancy plates I never used, saving them for a dinner party that never happened. I kept my closet half empty, just in case a husband moved in one day. I was not really living my own life. I was just acting like a person waiting for a bus that was never going to stop at my station. Sometimes I would sit in the back of the church during the service. When the pastor talked about love, I felt like he was looking right at me. I would bow my head and pray the same prayer I had prayed for years. Lord, please bring me a partner. Take away this lonely feeling. I thought that being single was a mistake that needed to be fixed. I did not realize that I was looking for a person to save me, instead of looking for the person I was meant to be. I was so busy looking at the empty chair across from me that I forgot to look at the beautiful life right in front of me. I felt like a ghost in my own story, just waiting for the day my real life would start. The day it happened started like any other Tuesday. The sun was shining, and the birds were singing outside my window. I felt so happy because today was our 3rd anniversary. I wore my favorite blue dress and spent an hour fixing my hair, making sure every curl was perfect. I felt sure that tonight was the night. My heart beat fast in my chest. I kept thinking that David would finally get down on one knee. I had waited so long for this moment. I felt like a princess who was finally going to get her crown. I remember how we first met at the community library 2 years ago. I was struggling to carry a stack of heavy art books, and David had rushed over to help me. He had such a kind, warm smile, and we spent hours talking about our favorite stories. Those first few months were like a dream. I still remember the time we went to the beach to watch the sunset. We ate ice cream and laughed until our stomachs hurt, watching the waves roll in. He told me then that he had never met anyone who understood his heart the way I did. It felt like we were 2 pieces of a puzzle that finally fit together. I met him at the small park where we had our first date. The trees were green, and the air felt warm. I saw David standing by the bench. He looked very serious. My smile grew wide as I walked toward him. I opened my purse and touched the little velvet box I had bought to hold the ring I was sure he would give me. I even had a spot in my jewelry box at home waiting for it. He did not smile when I reached him. He did not hug me like he always did. He took a deep breath and looked down at his shoes. My heart stopped beating for a second. The air in the park suddenly felt very cold. He started to talk, but his voice was quiet and shaky. He said that he was sorry. He said that he had been thinking for a long time. He told me that he did not see a future with me anymore. He said he needed to be alone. It felt like the world was spinning too fast. I could not hear the birds anymore. I could only hear the loud thumping of my own heart. I tried to speak, but my throat felt tight, as if I had swallowed a stone. I looked at his face, but he would not look back at me. He just turned around and walked away. He left me standing there all by myself. I looked down at my hands. I was still holding the empty velvet box. It felt so heavy now. My dream was broken into a million pieces. The beautiful dress I wore felt like a costume for a play that nobody wanted to see. I stood in the park as people walked by, but no one saw the girl whose life had just ended. I wanted to scream, but I could not make a sound. I was just a girl with an empty box and a heart that felt like it was made of glass. I realized then that I had built my whole life on a promise that was not real. I had waited for him to make me happy, and now I had nothing at all. I walked to the bus stop in the rain, feeling very small and very alone in the big world. The days that followed were like walking through a thick, gray fog. I stayed in my small apartment, pulling the heavy curtains shut, so the bright sun could not find me. The world outside kept moving. People were laughing on the street, and cars honked as they hurried to work, but my life had simply stopped. Every single morning, I woke up, and the first thing I felt was the heavy, cold ache in my chest. It was the same pain I had felt when he walked away, and it was waiting for me every single day, right there on the edge of the bed. I did not want to see anyone. I did not want to talk. I just wanted to hide until the hurt went away, but it never did. I spent all my hours on my knees. I prayed more than I ever had before. My prayers were not peaceful anymore. They were loud, messy, and full of tears. I spent my time pacing the floor, talking to the ceiling. Lord, why did you let this happen? I cried out. I did everything right. I waited for him. I was a good person. I followed all the rules. Why is my life so empty now? I waited for a sign. I waited for a soft feeling of comfort to wrap around my shoulders. I waited for God to whisper that everything would be okay, but all I heard was the ticking of the clock on my wall. Silence was my only answer. It felt like God was very far away, behind a wall I could not climb. Before, I thought prayer was a way to get what I wanted, if I was just good enough. Now, it felt like I was talking to a wall. I grew angry. I started to wonder if God was even listening to a girl like me. I thought maybe he had forgotten my name, or that he simply did not care about my lonely heart. My faith, which used to be my warm, soft blanket, now felt like a heavy, cold stone in my pocket. I wondered if I had been wrong about everything. If God loved me, why was I sitting here in the dark with nothing but my salty tears? I stopped reading my Bible because the beautiful words felt like they were for other people, not for a broken girl like me. I stopped going to church because seeing all those happy couples holding hands made me want to scream. I felt like I was living in a dry, hot wilderness where no water could be found. I was thirsty for love, thirsty for peace, and thirsty for an answer that never came. I felt betrayed by the very things I had trusted my whole life. I looked at my empty hands and wondered why they were always grasping for air. I was tired of being strong. I was tired of being patient. I was tired of waiting for a heaven that felt like it was closed to me. I felt like I was drifting in the middle of a deep, dark ocean with no land in sight. I was truly lost, and I was beginning to fear that maybe, just maybe, I would be lost forever. The silence in my apartment started to feel like a heavy blanket. After weeks of crying, the tears finally stopped, but they were replaced by something much colder. I felt a hard, sharp knot forming right in the middle of my heart. It was bitterness. I did not want to be this way, but I could not help it. Every time I looked at my phone, I saw pictures of happy friends, smiling at engagement parties or planning their beautiful weddings. The sight of their joy made me want to pull the plug on my whole world. I started to turn my phone off, just so I would not have to see what everyone else was doing. I did not want to know who was getting married or who was having a baby. It was too much to take. My friends started to call, but I let it go to voicemail. I could hear their voices on the recording, sounding so sweet and so worried. "Grace, are you okay? We miss you," they would say. Their kindness felt like a knife. I knew they were only trying to be good friends, but I was terrified of their pity. I could picture the sad look in their eyes when they saw me. I could imagine them whispering about me behind my back, saying things like, "Poor Grace, she is still all alone." I could not stand the thought of being the girl everyone felt sorry for. I would rather be lonely in my room than be a project for them to fix. I began to make excuses. "I am busy." I would text back, even when I was just sitting in the dark, watching the shadows crawl across the wall. I stopped going to coffee shops where we used to meet. I was afraid that if I went out, I would see someone I knew, and they would ask me the same painful questions. "Are you seeing anyone new yet?" they would ask. "Do not worry, the right one will come along soon," they would tell me with a fake, sad smile. Those words made me want to run away. I felt like I had a giant sign on my back that said, "Broken." I found myself pulling away from everyone. I thought that if I stayed alone, I would not have to be reminded of what I did not have. My loneliness was bad, but my fear of being pitied was much, much worse. I felt like I was hiding inside a fortress made of my own hurt feelings. I did not want their help and I did not want their prayers. I just wanted the world to leave me alone. I was nursing my sadness like it was the only thing I had left that was truly mine. I didn't see that I was pushing away the very people who were trying to love me. I was safe from pity, yes, but I was also drifting further and further away from the light. I was so busy protecting my broken heart that I did not see I was actually building a prison for it. One rainy afternoon, the walls of my apartment started to feel like they were closing in on me. I could not stand the quiet anymore, so I grabbed my coat and walked out the door. I did not know where I was going, but my feet led me toward the small park where I had been broken months ago. I sat on a wooden bench, watching the water drip from the dark leaves. I felt so tired of being alone. I wanted to hear a voice that was not my own. Just as I was about to stand up, an older man sat down on the other end of the bench. He had kind eyes and wore a soft, gray sweater. He didn't try to talk to me at first. He just looked at the rain. "It is a hard day to be outside," he said finally. His voice was deep and steady, like a solid rock. I just needed to leave my room, I said, looking down at my shoes. The quiet in my house is too loud. He nodded, as if he understood exactly what I meant. I am Daniel, he said. I spent a lot of time here. It helps me think. I looked at him and saw a peace in his face that I had not felt in a very long time. I don't know why, but I started to talk. I told him about the empty ring box. I told him about the prayers that felt like they hit the ceiling and fell back down. I told him how I had spent years waiting for a man to come and give me a life. I told him that I felt like I was just waiting for a train that would never arrive. When I stopped, my heart felt a little lighter, but I still felt lost. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. He did not give me a sad look. He did not tell me that I would find a husband soon, which was what everyone else always said. He said something very strange instead. Grace, you are looking at your life like it is a waiting room. You think the only thing that matters is the person who will sit in the chair next to you. But what if God is not keeping you single to punish you? What if he is keeping you single because he is building something inside of you that you cannot build with someone else? I stared at him. I had never thought about it that way. I always thought singleness was a place you stayed until you were good enough to leave. Daniel smiled gently. You are not a half-person, Grace. You are a whole person, but you have forgotten how to be one. You are not waiting for life to start. You are living it right now, but you are too busy looking away to notice. His words hit me like a splash of cool water. I had spent years waiting for a partner, but Daniel was telling me I was already a person worth knowing. I felt a small spark of something I hadn't felt in months. It was not hope for a man, but hope for myself. I sat on the cold bench and looked at the rain. Daniel's words stayed in my mind like a bright light. I had never heard anyone talk like that before. Usually people told me to just keep waiting. They said that God would bring the right person when I was ready. But Daniel was telling me something different. He was telling me that I was already ready, but I was not doing anything. My hands were still shaking, but the fear was starting to melt away. I looked at him and felt a sudden need to be honest. I was tired of lying to myself. I don't know who I am without someone else, I whispered. My voice was very small, but Daniel heard me. I told him how I felt like I was just a ghost in my own house. I told him that I did not have any big dreams because I thought those were for couples to build together. I had no hobbies that were just mine. I had no goals that were not about getting married. I had given away all my pieces to people who did not even know me. Daniel looked at me with a very kind face. He did not look at me like I was a broken toy. He looked at me like I was a person who was just waking up. He leaned forward a little bit. He did not yell, but his voice was very firm and clear. He asked me the question that changed everything. Grace, he said, are you waiting for a husband, or are you waiting for your life to start? I felt like he had just opened a window in a room that had been shut for years. I started to cry, but these were not the same sad tears I had been crying for months. These tears felt like they were cleaning out the dust from my heart. I realized he was right. I was so busy waiting for a man to give me a purpose that I had forgotten to look for the purpose God already gave me. I had been sitting in the rain, waiting for someone to come and carry an umbrella for me, when I could have just stood up and walked into the sun. I've been waiting for my life to start, I said, and the words felt true for the first time. I looked at the empty ring box in my pocket. It didn't look like a treasure anymore. It looked like a heavy weight that I did not need to carry. Daniel nodded slowly. He did not give me a map or a list of things to do. He just gave me the truth. He told me that my life was not a waiting room. It was a journey, and I was the only one who could take the first step. For the first time, I felt like the world was not a scary place. It was a place where I could grow. I was ready to stop waiting. That night, I sat on my bed and looked at my room. It looked different now. For years, I had treated this place like a waiting room. I had kept everything plain and simple, like I was ready to pack my bags and move out the moment a man asked me to be his wife. I realized then that I had been building something dangerous in my heart. I had built an idol. I didn't think of it like that before. I thought I was just being a good, romantic girl who wanted to be loved. But sitting there in the quiet, I saw the truth. I had put the idea of a husband on a throne where only God should be. I closed my eyes and started to be very honest with myself. I had spent so much time thinking about how a man would make me feel important. I thought that if I were a wife, then I would finally be somebody. I thought that being married would fix all my sad days and stop the loneliness from creeping into my room at night. I had turned a person, someone I hadn't even met yet, into a savior. I was asking a human to give me the peace that only God could give. This was my idol. It was a golden statue made of my own dreams and my own fears. I thought about all the hours I had spent crying over not being chosen. I realized I was not really crying because I missed a person. I was crying because I didn't like who I was when I was alone. I wanted a man to come and tell me I was pretty, tell me I was special, and tell me I was safe. I was using romance as a bandage for my broken heart, but the bandage was made of paper, and it was falling apart. Every time a relationship ended, the paper tore, and I was left with the same old hurt. I picked up the empty ring box from my desk. It felt light and cheap in my hands now. I had expected it to be the key to my whole life, but it was just a piece of plastic and velvet. I stood up and walked to the trash can. My hand shook, but I let the box drop. It hit the bottom with a small, hollow sound. That was the sound of my idol breaking. It was scary to be alone with my heart, but it was also a relief. I realized that if I wanted to be whole, I had to stop looking for someone else to finish me. I had to let God be the one who filled up the empty spaces. I started to pray, but this time, I didn't ask for a man. I asked for the strength to be the woman I was created to be, even if I was by myself. The idol was gone, and for the first time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I sat in the quiet of my living room for a long time. The house felt different now that I had thrown away the empty ring box. It was not just a box that was gone. It was a lie I had been telling myself. For years, I had walked around saying that I was waiting for a man to come and save me. I said that I couldn't be happy because I was still single. I said that I couldn't start my own business or learn new things because I was too busy looking for a husband. But sitting there, I realized I was not waiting for a man. I was hiding behind him. It was a very painful truth to swallow. I felt a hot sting in my eyes. I had used my singleness as a soft, comfortable pillow to rest my head on, so I would not have to do anything hard. Growing up is scary. Taking risks is hard. Learning how to be strong when no one is watching is a difficult job. It was much easier to just blame my loneliness for why my life was standing still. I told myself that I was waiting for God's timing, but really, I was just scared to grow. I didn't want to fail, so I didn't even try. I looked at my dusty bookshelf. There were books I had wanted to read for years, but I never picked them up. I thought, why bother? I'll just wait until I'm married, and we can read them together. I looked at my kitchen. I only had one of everything because I was waiting for us to need a set of two. I had put my whole life on pause. I was like a seed that refused to sprout because it was afraid of the sun. The seed was safe in the dark, but it would never grow into a flower. I was safe in my loneliness, but I was never going to become the woman God made me to be. The realization hit me hard. I had been using my status as a single woman as an excuse to be lazy with my own heart. I thought that being single was a time for sleeping and waiting. Now I saw that singleness was actually a time for training. It was a time for me to learn how to be brave. It was a time for me to find out what I liked, what I was good at, and how to be kind to myself when things were tough. I didn't need a husband to give me permission to grow. I didn't need a ring to prove that I was a person of value. I was already valuable. I was just refusing to work on my own life. I felt a sense of shame, but under that shame, there was a new, strong fire. I was finally ready to stop hiding. I was ready to do the hard work of growing up, one day at a time. I woke up the next morning feeling different. For the first time in years, I did not reach for my phone to check for messages that were never there. I did not spend my time thinking about who I was not. Instead, I thought about who I could be. I remembered a time long ago when I loved to draw. I used to spend hours sitting by the window with my pencils, filling pages with colors and shapes. I had been so good at it, but I had put it all away when I decided that being a romantic girl was more important than being an artist. I had buried my love for art under a pile of sad thoughts about being single. I walked to my closet and pushed aside my old coats. In the back, tucked under a box, I found my old sketchbook. It was dusty and the edges were worn, but when I opened it, I felt a spark. It felt like greeting an old friend I had forgotten for a very long time. I grabbed my pencils and sat down. My hand was a little shaky at first, but as I started to draw, the shaking stopped. The lines on the paper began to look like the things in my heart. It felt like I was finally letting out a breath I had been holding for years. Then I thought about the local children's center in my neighborhood. I had walked past it 100 times, always too busy feeling sorry for myself to go inside. They always needed help with their after-school programs. I decided I would go there. I did not go to find a man or to be seen by anyone. I went because I had a gift, and it was time to share it. When I walked through the doors, the room was full of noise and happy energy. There were kids running around, laughing and playing. "We need someone to help with the craft table," the lady in charge said with a smile. I felt a little nervous, but I nodded. I spent the afternoon helping a little girl learn how to paint a sunset. She was so proud of her work, and her smile was like the sun itself. Seeing her joy made me feel something I had not felt in a long time. It was not the kind of joy I expected from romance. It was a deeper, stronger joy. It was the joy of being useful. It was the joy of giving instead of just wishing to receive. As the day ended and I walked home, I did not feel like a half anymore. I felt like a person with hands that could create and a heart that could give. I was not waiting for someone to complete my life. I was busy adding color to the world around me. I realized that my life had been a garden all along, and I had been waiting for someone else to pull the weeds. Now I was finally doing the work myself. The sun was setting, and for the first time in a long time, I was not looking for a prince. I was just happy to be alive right where I was. A few weeks after I started at the community center, my best friend Sarah invited me to a big dinner party. I felt a little nervous. In the past, going to a party without a date felt like walking into a storm. I would stand in the corner, feeling like a broken piece of a puzzle that did not fit anywhere. I would worry about who would talk to me and who would think I was sad. But this time, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I was whole. I did not need a man to make me a person. I was already Grace, and that was enough. When I walked into the room, the air was warm and smelled like good food. There were many couples there, laughing and holding hands. I saw people I had not seen in a long time. One of my old friends, Linda, walked over to me. She looked me up and down with a look that I knew very well. It was the look of pity. "Oh, Grace," she said, her voice sounding very sad. "It is so brave of you to come here all by yourself. I know how hard it is to be single. Are you feeling okay?" Before, I would have wanted to hide. I would have felt the sting of her words and wanted to run out the door. But today, I felt different. I did not feel like a poor girl who needed to be saved. I felt calm. I looked Linda in the eyes and gave her a real, honest smile. I did not feel angry, and I did not feel like I had to hide my life. "I am doing more than okay, Linda," I said, and my voice was clear and steady. "I am actually very happy. I have been spending my time painting and helping out at the children's center. I am learning so much about myself, and it has been a beautiful season." Linda looked surprised. She expected me to cry or to start talking about how lonely I was. She didn't know what to say because I was not playing the part of the sad, single girl anymore. I did not need her pity because I was no longer pitying myself. I walked through the rest of the party with my head held high. When people asked me why I was single, I didn't make a sad face. I told them that I was busy becoming who I was meant to be.
It was a test and I passed.
I realized that the stigma of being single was only a cage if I let it be. If I was proud of my life, then no one could make me feel small. I spent the night talking to new people, laughing and eating good food. I was a whole person at a party full of couples, and I fit in just fine. I was finally free. I started to notice little changes in my life, like tiny flowers pushing up through the hard ground after a long winter. These were not big, loud victories that people would cheer for on a stage. They were quiet, secret wins that happened inside my own heart. I started to like the person I saw in the mirror. For so long, I had looked at my own face and only saw the things I thought were missing. I saw a girl who was not a wife, a girl who was not chosen, and a girl who was always waiting. Now, I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who was growing, learning, and finding her own way. I remember one morning sitting by my window with a cup of tea. The sun was coming up, painting the sky in colors of pink and soft gold. I realized I was not feeling lonely. I was just happy to be awake. I did not have a man sitting across from me, and my house was still quiet, but the quiet did not feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a garden. I was finally comfortable in my own skin. I realized that enough was not something I had to find in someone else. Enough was something I had built inside myself by trusting God and by being kind to my own soul. I started to take better care of my home. I bought a pretty plant for my table and painted one of my walls a happy, bright color. I was doing these things for me, not for a guest who might never come. It was a small victory, but it made me feel proud. My self-esteem grew slowly, like a tree getting stronger roots. I stopped comparing my life to the lives of my friends. When I heard about their weddings or their trips, I felt truly happy for them, but I did not feel bad for myself. I knew that their paths were their own, and my path was mine. God had a plan for them, and He had a plan for me, too. There was such a deep peace in knowing that I was whole on my own. It felt like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was not chasing after love, and because of that, I was not afraid of losing it. I was busy planting seeds of kindness in my neighborhood, helping the children at the center, and spending time learning things that made my heart sing. I was finally living in the now, instead of waiting for a later that might never happen. Every day felt like a gift because I was no longer holding my breath. I had learned to love my own company, and I found that when I stopped looking for someone to complete me, I finally had the space to be free. The tide had turned, and I was finally sailing toward a life of purpose. The afternoon sun was warm and kind, just like it had been the day I sat on the bench and met Caleb for the very first time. He had stopped to ask if he could sit down, and from that first moment, talking to him felt so easy and natural. There was no pressure to be someone I was not, and no nervous feeling of wondering if he liked me. We talked for a long time about our dreams and the things we loved to do, and I felt a joy I had never known before. He was kind, he was funny, and he actually listened to my words. For the first time, I did not feel that old, scary ache of loneliness in my chest. I did not feel like a half looking for a hole anymore. I was Grace, the woman who loved to paint, the woman who helped children learn to create, and the woman who had finally learned to walk with God in the light. Because I was already whole, I did not need Caleb to fill up my empty spaces. I could just enjoy his company as a gift. I looked at him and realized I was finally ready for a true partnership. I was not ready because I was lonely, and I was not ready because I wanted someone to fix my life. I was ready because I had learned how to be a friend to myself first, and I knew how to stand on my own 2 feet. I realized that a healthy partnership is not 2 halves trying to make a whole. It is 2 whole people deciding to walk the same road together. The months that followed were filled with the most beautiful adventures. Caleb and I spent our days painting in the park, volunteering at the children's center, and growing closer in a way that felt steady and true. Every day, I felt a deep peace in my heart that told me I was exactly where I needed to be. I had stopped waiting for life to start, and because I stopped waiting, life had finally begun to unfold in the most wonderful way. The purpose I had been searching for was never found in a ring or a title, but in the way I learned to love my own life. One crisp autumn day, Caleb took me back to the same spot in the park where we had first met. The trees were turning beautiful shades of gold and orange, and the air felt like a promise. He took my hands in his, and his eyes were filled with so much love and respect. He didn't look at me like he needed to complete me. He looked at me like he saw exactly who I was and loved me more for it. Right there on the path where we became friends, Caleb knelt down. He did not pull out an empty box. He pulled out a ring that shone like the morning light. "Grace," he said with a voice that was soft and sure, "you are the most whole and beautiful woman I have ever known. I want to walk this road with you for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" I smiled, and I knew the answer before he even finished his sentence. "Yes," I said, and it was the easiest, most honest word I had ever spoken. Our wedding day was a day of pure, quiet joy. It was simple and sweet, filled with the people who had watched me grow from a girl in the rain to a woman in the sun. As I walked down the aisle to meet Caleb, I did not feel like I was waiting for someone to save me. I felt like a whole person stepping into a beautiful new chapter. When we said our vows, I felt the presence of God surrounding us with love. I was finally married to Caleb, the man who respected my heart and loved my spirit. I was a wife, yes, but I was also still Grace, the artist and the giver. I was finally, truly free. My heart was full, and my life was finally, wonderfully complete. True happiness does not come from another person completing you. Real growth begins when you learn to value yourself, trust God's timing, and live your life with purpose. Sometimes being single is not a punishment. It is a season of healing, growth, and preparation for the person you are becoming. Thanks for watching.